Hi everybody, this is Dan Stolberger. Welcome to this week's KFIR Middle East Update. It's the week of February 4th. That's 2022. So before we jump in, grab the notes, the PDF PowerPoints available at our website at holygroundexplorations.com, or it should be a link on the YouTube page that you're accessing this video on. So what's going on in the Middle East? What's going on with Israel? That's the big question. Boy, where do we want to start here? With everything that's going on, let's start with Syria. We know from last week's report that Russia has started to co-op with the Syrians as far as patrolling the Golan border between Israel and Syria. Israel's got some issues and some major questions, saying, we've had this agreement that Russia will not inhibit us from taking out Iranian arms that are making their way through Syria into the hands of Hezbollah. And so is this a change in policy? Will the Russians be very much involved in keeping Israeli airstrikes from happening in Syria? Or is this a wink of the eye saying, hey, we need to protect our assets of Syrians, but what you do with Iran is entirely up to you? We're not sure yet, but Israel struck a Hezbollah facility this week, and it happened to be just outside of Damascus at night. And this is the first airstrike in Syria since the Russian Air Force started patrolling with the Syrian Air Force near Israel's border. No response from the Russians at this point in time, but this is something that we're going to be keeping our eye on. This is our news bites, by the way, just sort of pop, before we get into a couple substantial articles. But Abrahamic Accords, everybody's still waiting for the Saudis ultimately decide one way or another if they're going to join the Accords. But interestingly enough, the question has been raised, will Kuwait be the next Gulf or Arab country to join the Abraham Accords? Kuwaiti newspapers, or essentially their state-run papers, as we probably know, are calling for the normalization. Well, a Kuwaiti poet, I like this, writes, "Let's take the weight out of Kuwait." And so another thing to keep our eyes on, will Kuwait become the next participant or member of the Abrahamic Accords? Of course, we can't have a Middle East update without talking about the COVID or Omicron. I've been calling this the great unraveling that's taking place. Political figures needing to save face. They need to somehow get a win in the midst of all of this. I've gone on record and strongly believe this, is that Israel is in the process of reopening. I do not think they'll ever go backwards from this point in time, but it will be staged in somewhat to minimize or to protect the government that's in place. Again, there has to be a win for Naftali Bennett in the midst of all this. Nobody's going to raise their hands and say, whoops, we were wrong. And so, interestingly enough, one of the members of Bennett's coalition, Lieberman, I just pulled this quote out from him. He says, in terms of the influence of the Omicron, I don't see it being any more disruptive at this moment than the flu. And just as we live with the flu, we're going to have to figure out how to live with Omicron. And so we're getting rumblings, and we know that some things are beginning to reopen. Here at Holy Ground, we're excited about that. Looking forward, once we can kind of make our way and see with our own eyes what's actually been impacted as far as taking people to Israel. As soon as we can do that, we will. And we just want to get back into the routine of taking people to Israel. Oh, I can't wait. All right, last up, and again, I think we covered this a couple weeks ago. Abbas, as you know, the head of Fatah, Palestinian Authority, was elected 17 years ago to serve a 4-year term. He's on his 17th year now. His age being a factor, his health being a factor, all things sort of are beginning to boil over in terms of where do we stand with the two-state solution, what's going to happen next. And so the question is that if Abbas steps down, who will replace that vacuum? And there's kind of a looming power struggle going on at this time with the Palestinian Authority in terms of who's next and what kind of chaos will that bring? Will that, in a sense, set this two-state solution once again on the sidelines until things, make themselves clear or whatever? Where does Hamas fit into all of this? General elections, nobody knows. And that's probably the best way to end that subject with that phrase, ain't nobody knowing what's next, as far as the Palestinian Authority goes. All right, some of our articles, as you probably heard, Amnesty International has come out and basically put out a report that was titled Israel's Apartheid Against the Palestinians. They claim that Israel imposes a system of oppression, domination against Palestinians across all areas of its control. Goes on to say that even in the occupied Palestinian territories, dealing against the Palestinian refugees, everything is done in order to benefit Jewish Israelis. It went on to argue that this amounts to apartheid and it's prohibited by international law. Basically, proponents of this are saying about time, but it is just a way to attempt to dismantle Israel. Israel is a Jewish state. Israel, say it with me. Israel is a Jewish state. And everything that's going on with the rise of anti-Semitism, this is another brick in the wall, in a sense, to turn the eyes of the world against Israel. Having been there, I can tell you this is a fallacy. And we'll find with the Palestinian Authority in one of our next articles about the innocence of terrorism amongst the Palestinians. It's ridiculous, but it's that Nazi propaganda that says if you tell a lie long enough, sooner or later people will start to believe it. Well, also big headlines, as you know, the ISIS leader in Syria he committed suicide, took out his own life. Again, the U.S. is targeted. ISIS has been attempting to resurface a huge battle a couple weeks ago in a prison and against really American forces as well. And so a couple days ago, special ops surrounded the facility, and instead of surrendering, I don't even think I can say his name, Abraham al-Hashmani al-Karish in northwest Syria blew himself up and his entire family. Again, the allies, Israelis or whatever, are in a sense congratulating Biden and the administration for taking out another terrorist. And again, the words simply are, the world's a safer place without this guy. So that just took place this week. We thought we'd give you an article on that. New technology, we've got, if you've been to Israel before, now we've had the amazing opportunity to see the Iron Dome at work. And whether it was outside of Sderot or down in Eilat, it's amazing technology that the Israelis have. They are now saying they have new technology, this article here, that's referred to as a laser wall. Israel will surround itself, its borders, with a laser wall with the abilities to intercept rockets or missiles that are coming in. Naftali Bennett just announced this from Tel Aviv just this week. They're going to begin, the IDF will begin using this laser technology, this interception system experimentally, and then later operationally, starting in the southern part of the country. And for us that have been there and we've been to Sderot, we know that it's the area around Gaza. This is where the majority of rockets are being launched. And so, again, the campaign has been brought about to weaken the let's face it, to weaken Iran, because Iran is the largest state-sponsored terrorist in the world. All these rockets, Hezbollah, Hamas, or whatever, are coming from one place, all right? And that's Iran. And we know that rocket technology is increasing. Up to this point, many of the rockets in Lebanon, even in Gaza, have no really precision technology, but that's being changed. And a lot of these Israeli incursions into Syria, taking out Iranian sort of weapon depots, are all having to do with this technology of taking rockets and fixing precision guidance systems on there so that they're not just landing out in the middle of a field somewhere, but they'll have a specific target. And this is what a major concern of Israel is at this time. So we have a new technology being developed, and you can read more of that article here in our update. And last, I was going to say last and not, not the way I'd like to end. You always like to end a bit on an upper note, but truth be told, this is Palestinian libel. This, once again, the Palestinian Media Watch expose on that phrase that I had told you that says, if you tell a lie big enough and you keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. Are you ready for this? Fasten your seatbelts. That, of course, was Nazi propaganda. The Palestinian Media Watch, friends of ours here at Holy Ground, expose one of the big lies that are being told now by PA spokespersonalities. This guy's name is Nasser Al-Laham. He's a regular host on official PA TV. Are you ready for this? Here's the quote. All Palestinian terrorists have refused to kill women, children, and civilians. That's what Israel does. We simply shoot our guns in the air, and we're looking at kidnapping in order, and we take care of those that we kidnap in order to have a bargaining chip to release our oppressed prisoners that Israel's holding. What can I say? What can I say about suicide bombers going into the local in Israel, Starbucks, not Starbucks, for them it'd be something different, and blowing themselves up? What about the stabbings that are taking place of women, even women in the streets of Jerusalem, in the old city? What about the car rammings that are taking place? What about the kidnapping of the 3 teenage boys, and they killed these boys and buried them in shallow graves outside of Hebron? Yeah, tell me about it. Yeah, tell me about it. So anyhow, another article. Again, I would like to have ended on a bit of an upper thing. Let's attempt to do that by praying that Israel will continue to reopen, that Christians will understand the importance of standing with Israel today. And I would hope and pray that you would have the opportunity one day, if you haven't already, to walk the streets of Jerusalem, to put your feet, dangle them over the boat in the Sea of Galilee. Take a hike up to En-Gedi and sit again with your feet in the water and read the Psalms that David wrote from there. It's an incredible experience. It's our prayer. So we'll leave you with that. God bless you and shalom.